Okay, we are there. Hi, folks. Good evening, good morning, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to my friends who are watching this show from all over the world. Heartfulness Wellness extends a very warm welcome to all of you joining this show. And as we had one topic, which was PTSD, which is post traumatic stress depression disorder. Sorry. And we found that this topic was very extensive. And of recent, I graduated, and my mentor is here, and I thank her for being here. I graduated as a PPNE, and that means it's a pre and perinatal educator and psychologist. During this entire journey, I realized that PTSD is big, not only in mothers who have recently delivered, but also in babies. And that came as a big revelation to me. It was like a veil which was removed off my eyes. And that's where I decided to request my mentor, Christianna, and I'm honored to introduce her to all of you in this show today. So, welcome, Christiana. She is by profession a registered craniosacral therapist. She is a pre and perinatal educator. She is a licensed massage therapist. She is also a life activation practitioner. So this topic merges science with spirituality. So she integrates craniosacral therapy, massage, PPNE, and her somatic practices. And she lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. Her work embraces today's movement towards consciousness and the merging of science and spirituality. She's the director of the education wing of APA, that is Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health, and she provides instruction to professionals and parents for bringing babies into this world. Her own experience, her own experiences of birthing two children have sparked her interest in educating parents and professionals about birth psychology and how the earliest experiences in life are so foundational to defining human potential. She interweaves science and spirituality to help people navigate the invisible realms of their nervous system, their psyche, and their soul so that they can make their decisions that will drive connection to themselves and to the world. So that is Christiana. Thank you, Christiana, for really accepting this invitation and giving us your most valuable time. And I look forward to having this conversation and cherishing moments with you. So this topic to me came some years back when I was reading this book, my dear friends. It's a beautiful book which you all should read. It is The Body Keeps the Score, and it is a New York bestseller. It is Bessel van der Kolk. And it really shows us or really deep dwells on this topic of trauma. So, for me to understand trauma from an Eastern mindset was a little difficult until I walked the way and graduated as a PPNE. So, to delve more into the topic today, Christiana, my first question to you would be, what is PTSD? What is post traumatic stress disorder? And why is it important to understand this specifically in relation to birth trauma?
Wow. Well, I just wanted to thank you first, Snehal, that for that lovely introduction. And I've loved coming to know you over the last year and a half. I think we've developed a deep bond and a friendship as well as a work relationship. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much. To answer your question, I think we really have to understand who we are as individuals and where we come from because when we intersect the spirit realm, right, our soul body, and how it comes into form on this planet, this is why it's so important that we look at birth for every human being on this planet and understand that. we are deeply connected to nature, our anatomy, our psychology, our mentalness, and we understand that when you walk out into nature, you can often feel restored and refreshed and whole and at peace, yes? So, if we understand that we are intricately linked with nature, and then we compare where the world is today and how mechanical we are devoid, if you will, of this sacred respect of our innate connection to nature, then we can really start understanding what trauma is. Because we look at trauma from a textbook standpoint, that it's, anything that overwhelms the nervous system, anything that's too much, too fast, too long, or not getting your emotional needs met. But it's really at the foundational level. Trauma is when we are disconnected from our blueprint, from our soul, from our heart. And I know this is what, is so beautiful about the Heartfulness Institute, is it gets people to go within and connect to the spiritual nature of ourself, or the invisible nature that we can't see or touch, but we can experience firsthand. So I see today's world in that every human being has had trauma at the most foundational level, because it is traumatic leaving the spiritual realm. It's a hero's journey. So no matter what, like, even if we have the most nurturing, loving environment, let's say a natural birth, and the mother feels so supported and empowered, um, and the baby's been born vaginally, that is still a very hardship on the baby and the mother, because there's a death and a birth all at once. Anyone who's witnessed a birth, you feel the power of this energetic portal, if you will, that opens up. And anyone who's become a mother for the first time understands that something deeply profound happens to their being when they give life and they let go of part of their own life. And so there's that. I mean, that is a trauma, and that this baby has had a shattering. It's left its inner uterine world, for instance, or it's left its, seat in the divine realm. And here it is, it has to breathe differently. It's outside of its mother, the womb, and it has to adapt very quickly. And then when you add on, let's say, the environment that's most commonplace through our birthing rituals today, just with modern day technology. And I don't want to, I'm not negative about where we are and how we got here, because science and technology has helped us so tremendously. And it's part of the story of how we got here, because women really wanted, they, to understand how to improve their birthing experiences. And when we got pain medicine, and then we got the luxuries of hospitals, and we understood where germs come from, I mean, all of this gave birth to our modern day, more mechanistic, our medicalized form of birth. And where I think we need to go is to understand, how do we interweave the spirit essence of ourself with the scientific advancements that we have. And we can. It's very easy. We just have to recognize and educate our staff, our medical professionals, our parents, even, who have forgotten, how sacred we really are and what nature needs in order to thrive. And so maybe that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is how we can do that. But right now, for sure, we have people all over the world, I would say everyone has experienced more than just the simple birth trauma of the hero's journey coming into this world, but they have to overcome much more with the way we handle babies, with the way we issue medication and painkillers, and how we assist births, and even our actual consciousness. How a lot of times when the medical staff is working with a family, they're really busy with their own lives or their own to-do list, and they're not dropping into a space that's in their heart. They're coming to it from their mind, and it's simple things that we can teach people, and and when they do, you're driving connection, heartfelt connection between the person that you're caring for and then the family who's receiving the care. And there's just so much that flourishes and blossoms and comes to life when we have this heartfelt connection with the people that we serve in the healthcare industry.
It's an amazing journey for a baby to come into this world.
Yeah.
And even when Babuji Maharaj, one our grandmasters from Heartfulness, he describes birth as a separation. The
Mm.
soul feels separated, and the entire life, the heartfulness practices, what we have, enable us to walk the journey towards the source back from where we have come. And here you are also saying that this is a separation, and it is very sacred. We have to treat birth and the environment around the baby in a very sacred way. As a developmental therapist, which my background is, I've been practicing and I was looking at children who are born out of problems, who have undergone trauma. Like for us therapists, my if you ask me about a couple of years back, for me the definition of trauma would have been C-section. Baby did not cry immediately at birth. The mother had some problems. So this was, the red flags which we see, which we really see as developmental therapists. But now, having walked the way into pre and perinatal education,
Mhm.
and again, as you said, and as in India, we treat the womb. Garbha is a place where the soul or the consciousness evolves. So, when this journey has been so sacred, it comes to my mind that how can we define birth trauma in the bracket or in the dimension of pre and perinatal psychology?
That's such a wonderful question. And I think what you just stated, one of the key principles of this, birth psychology recognizes that babies are conscious.
Yes.
And so we kind of, science has it a little bit backwards, or has in the last few hundred years. They thought that babies didn't have consciousness, that consciousness comes from the brain development. And since babies are so underdeveloped and they need a lot of developmental time, that consciousness is something that emerges, almost as a hierarchical development of the brain. But what, mystics and spiritual gurus and teachers, for eons have known, and probably a lot of people come to know through their own life's journey in this remembering, right? Remembering who you are, where you came from, is that consciousness is infinite. It doesn't have a start or a stop. And the womb space, this garba that you're talking about, is where this divine spark, an individual can individuate, from this field, this unified field of consciousness, and then come to experience consciousness separate from this unified field. And that's how, we all have our soul's path, our soul's journey, our purpose here in life, and our own unique gifts. So they have consciousness before they're even conceived. these we work all the time with clients and communicating with spirit babies, communicating with babies while in the womb. And of course, we have adults. The whole birth psychology itself has a long track record of doing regression therapies with adults who remember their time in the womb. And when you can heal any kind of trauma, or let's say a conditional force that happened, they go on to thrive, because again, these experiences in the beginning of life, like you said earlier in the introduction, our earliest experiences are what makes the hierarchical brain, right? And what makes our belief system and how we interact with the world. So that I would birth psychology believes, since babies are conscious, that trauma really is when we don't recognize this, that we don't recognize that babies are of their own volition initiating birth, and that we're really the servants of babies. Babies should be treated like royalty. And even the mother, oftentimes, my job is to educate mothers these days who haven't been brought up in the traditional sense of how women used to do in ancient and indigenous times, our indigenous cultures, that they are giving up a piece of themselves for the baby to come in. And it's a dance. It's very much a dynamic dance between the mother and the baby. And when a mother can listen at the level of the heart, at the level of the soul to her baby, she will take a second seat. And then the baby knows what to do. Nature knows what to do if we can really trust and connect in that. So, from the standpoint of birth psychology, trauma is when this bond between a mother and a baby is not recognized as a, a duo, with deep consciousness. And in today's world, oftentimes women are women are not given the agency to birth. They are, assisted by the staff or the doctor, and the doctor does the birth. And that's completely, out of order. And that in and of itself causes trauma. And it disempowers our children from their own independence and their sense of accomplishment and how they come into the world. So there's a lot of interventions that take place today that rob children of this. And then of course, you see the world where it is today. And a lot of the psychological or mental illnesses and lack of health, this all starts from birth and our relationship with how we come in and how we are designed. So that, I hope, answers your question about, from the standpoint of birth psychology, what we consider trauma.
Absolutely. And as a practicing developmental therapist, I see a lot of kids who have autism, who have the attention deficit and hyperactive disorders, children who come to me with sensory processing disorders, essentially, and that aroused my interest to do the PPNE. That I wanted to look beyond what I saw at this level. I knew that the roots of what I'm seeing now did not exist now. It was somewhere, as you said, when the mother and the father even decided or not decided to have a child, both ways. So sometimes it is an accident that they come to me with, and they say, okay, we didn't plan the conception. So not planning the conception is again not planning the journey for your baby. And
Very
that's a
much.
it's a very sacred journey, and the bond which the parents share when they even think, and that's what even Daji says, that it is not about after you conceive, it is all about your attitude at the time of conception and before conception. So preparing the environment as a mother, as a father, as a family becomes essential if we want to walk into a new world. We see that the world has so many um, challenges with children and with relationships as we look around. And if we want to change the world, we really need to change the bond which the mother, father, and families have with the babies to come in. So, how do you look at this, and what are the key benefits of fostering a very strong baby and mother bond in very early? Not even, I mean,
Wow.
mothers
Yes.
say, yeah, I did some Garbha Sanskar. I tried connecting to the baby and talking to the baby, but I did that. Did I give the space to the baby to come back to me and connect back? So over to you.
Uh, well, this is a big question, and you brought up really deep topics, but let's see if we can approach this from Daji. I love when he says it's all about the attitude when you conceive. And I study hermetics. This is one of the things that I've been fascinated with for the last decade, and it guides my journey through this life. And in the hermetic standpoint, when we think of worth, to be worthy, it means to be prepared. And if we go back to this saying that, one of my teachers in craniosacral therapy, John Chitty, who's now passed, but he, said that babies are royalty. And so if you have the king or queen coming to your home, right? What are you going to do? I mean, even now, I live in the United States, if the president, comes by, there's a whole entourage of, Secret Service protocols. I mean, there's just you can't even imagine how much preparation and strategy that goes into every move that the president makes. Now, do we do this for babies? I think not. I even look at my own journey and how I got pregnant. Um, I wasn't planning on being pregnant. I wasn't even married. And in the birth psychology world, there's a whole imprint, this book that you brought up at the very beginning, The Body Keeps the Score. Um, I didn't know if I could keep the child. So there was this abortion ideation. And if we're saying that a soul is conscious and that they can feel the energy and every thought and emotion that's inside of you because it's fed to them not only through neuropeptides, what Candace Pert dubbed molecules of emotion, but there's an energetic sense to it as well. How would they feel their self-worth? Very first threshold of initiation or rite of passage that any child has to cross is, am I welcome? Am I loved? Am I safe in this world? So these are huge imprints that we deal with all the time. And you mentioned, autism and, ADHD, and there's so many things that are happening to our children. By the age of 12 in the United States of America, most children, 60% of children are on some form of medication. And the majority of that is for, asthma. So we don't even consider that like a medication. But technically it is because asthma is an irritant, the lungs are inflamed. And this comes from a nervous system that a baby has gone through so much shock trauma that now what they're displaying to the world is the inside world that they carry within. And so a child that has autism not only has, probably between ultrasounds, because if we think about babies, the morphogenetic field that a baby develops in is influenced by sound. And every vibration that we put in and around a mother, whether it's electromagnetic fields from 5G, cell phone, all the way to ultrasounds, at the hospital, which are constant, very much part of the whole protocol because we don't trust, the body's ability to grow babies. And because women have so many risk factors these days. So there's a lot of monitoring and interventions that are used, and sometimes unnecessarily, but at this point where we are in our world, necessary, but it's toxic. It's toxic to their field, and it influences the field. And it's so we're in a whole world of mess, because they say, I've even heard people, gut doctors say that by 2035, 85% of children will be some form on the spectrum of autism. That's wild. That's scary. Could you imagine our workforce, what the, gross domestic product or whatever the output of any country is, with the population largely debilitated? So, I mean, it brings up really important questions of, how do we connect at a soul level, at a heart level from the very beginning? And that is, we have to prepare better how we bring children into the world, and, put all of our resources. And it's been done in countries across the world now. Denmark's a great example. Our Indian, the Scandinavian countries, they Iceland, for instance, they put the majority of their resources into the youngest population. And by doing so, they have people of good health. And right now, in the United States where I live, we spend most of our healthcare money on the elderly population, instead of investing in early child development and education systems, or even birthing. So you brought up really great questions. I hope I answered it to some degree.
So, when you say that you need to foster the connection, and when you really need to look at how the mother and baby connect with each other, and still without, like even when I have seen my little one, Eliza, coming in, and we had a little bit of teething issues in the beginning, how can how does one recognize signs of the PTSD in infants and even mothers? Because sometimes mothers don't know, women don't know that they are having this problem, or they don't even know that their baby would be having such a problem. It's a problem of connectivity, it's a problem of, mm, sometimes they feel overwhelmed, sometimes they have. Recently I had I'm giving sessions, meditation sessions, heartfulness meditation sessions to a mother of a 4-month-old, uh, who had issues when the baby was born, and she doesn't know what to do with the thoughts. So in what way would these expressions be seen or felt?
Wow. Well, another big question, but babies communicate to us with their bodies. They communicate to us with their cries. And when I see it all the time, that people are just not aware, they're not educated that, again, babies are conscious and sentient, and that they have emotions. And yeah, maybe they're the most basic emotions, but it's they're the key emotions. Am I safe? Am I loved? Do I have the right to have needs and have somebody care for me? Do I have the right to feel supported? These are all things that we cover, in the course that you took, about everyone has universal emotional needs. And society has it that babies, they don't they're not conscious. So for instance, when a baby has colic, you constantly, you'll hear maybe they have a tummy ache, or maybe they're just a fussy baby. Well, that baby is trying to tell you about its birth story, about what happened to it in the womb. And, our fast paced life is not attuned to the sacredness or the holiness of human development. So, the first thing that you can do in order to connect more is connect with yourself. Number one, connect with yourself through mindfulness practice, mind-body practices, slowing down. The easiest thing is to just breathe. We don't even consciously breathe. So if we can consciously breathe, 3 deep breaths resets the nervous system. And when a mother is feeling a little overwhelmed, she can let her baby know, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, just like as if they're a real person and they understand her, because they do. And say, I'm overwhelmed right now, but this isn't your fault. This is just me, right? And having my own personal feelings. You can let that go. And when you have that kind of two-way conversation with your baby, whether it's in the womb, whether it's before it's born or right after the born, it takes a lot of anxiety off of mother's shoulders when they recognize that this child understands them and really just wants to love them. But I mean, there's a lot of need for education, which is why, APA exists and why we have these courses and why you have the courses on heartfulness. But we have a lot to uncover, and we need to educate ourselves on how babies communicate, right? And what their cries mean. Because when a baby cries, it has a different type of cry, for different needs. And mothers can come to understand what those cries are, especially if we understand that babies are usually, if they've got physical needs, and you've taken care of everything, you've given it food, you've changed its diaper, it's in comfortable clothes or whatnot, and it's still crying, then there's something emotional happening, and we have to address the emotional needs of the baby and understanding that they have a story to tell. And that usually takes, at this point, time, a therapist to help somebody translate how a baby is communicating. But I envision one day that we have a world where mothers have returned to this understanding that birth matters and that the story that happened continues even after they're born, and that it takes time for them to heal from that trauma we mentioned of the hero's journey. And all they want to do is share it with somebody. And if somebody's there to listen and just look in their eyes and say, oh man, I see this dent in your head, like that must have really hurt when you were coming out of me, like, wow. And just giving it kisses, nice and warm, loving kisses, and holding their baby at the breast and looking right into their eyes, kind of like drinking them in. These are all the ways that mothers can not only help their own anxiety, but help their baby as well. And you mentioned about signs. How do we know that mothers are having postpartum depression or anxiety? Well, it it's there's lack of sleep. Anytime you feel really frustrated and you're just like overwhelmed and you have anger, or you just don't want to deal with anything, you just want to disappear, these are all signs that you need more support. And that is the biggest thing that we need to help with in the postpartum world. Is in old times, it takes a village. There'd be a circle of women around a mother, and they would mother the mother after she gave birth, so she could just focus on recovering the outpouring of chi, like her life force when she gave that life, and just focus on her baby and have this team of people around her cooking, cleaning, doing, very specific things to her body's rituals that are helping her restore her body. And that, for the large part, doesn't even happen today. Our postpartum care is mostly to take your baby out of your home in the car to the doctor's office to get a check on what their weight is. And if you really want my opinion, doctors shouldn't be making house calls to our littlest most vulnerable population, like this, so that mothers don't have to leave this sacred hearth of their home in those first 40 days after birth, because there's so much disruption that can happen in the journey, just the simple journey to go to the doctor's office in those first few weeks. So that it's, again, going back and realizing that this is royalty. How do we treat royalty? Do we make the royal people leave their thrones and go out by themselves in the world to do what is considered a mundane task? I don't know. Usually they have lots of servants to do mundane tasks for them. Hopefully that answers that question.
You're putting all these things so beautifully, and uh, the puzzles which our world is facing at present of why this behavior, and why is my school going child not obedient, or why is he more on screen. I think all these questions would be having answers, or they wouldn't come across as questions if we practice good pre and perinatal care. And India does have a good practices. I remember when I gave birth to my baby, that was about 34 years back, my mother followed these. She just put me into a room, and though I was, that time protesting that I don't want to be in that room. So in India, women are sent back to the moment that a woman is pregnant, she's sent back to a mother's house, and she's taken care of, as you said, like a Maharani, like a queen, and everything is taken care, everything is given to her. And when the baby comes, there is a lovely masseur who comes, and of course now I tell them that massage is a language between the mother and baby, but there's nothing kept back to take care of the baby and the mother. But because of modern care and modern science walking into the sphere of this, it seems to be outdated, and it's called outdated practices, no longer useful. But now when we look at how the minds have developed because of this so-called technology what we have been using, we have to turn back and walk the way and say yes, what we were doing to welcome our babies much before was a beautiful way of welcoming them and making them feel wanted. So that is something which is so illustrious what you're talking about. So there's one question which I've had, and this is a Skendall Tackett's research. And how do you think that has influenced the current understanding and treatment approaches for PTSD related to birth trauma?
Oh man, well, I love Kathleen Kendall Tackett is brilliant. I've, heard her on a number of presentations and read some of her books, but she really understood that um, in the United States, the DSM, we were treating postpartum or post-traumatic stress disorder for people who were like, veterans. And then she started to realize when she was looking at, you know, symptoms that women were showing from just breastfeeding, struggling with breastfeeding, just simple things. And I remember from my own experience, I couldn't breastfeed and it was so hard. It was just heartbreaking because I didn't understand how my body was producing milk, but my baby wouldn't feed. And it created so much havoc between my daughter and I. Well, Kathleen, and I understand now, like, where her research was coming from. When a mother isn't able to breastfeed, or if that initial bond between the mother and baby is interrupted, then there's a whole dynamo or domino effect, excuse me, of symptoms that can happen between the baby and the mother. And she looked at it and realized, wait a second, this is just like PTSD. Whether they would be having flashbacks, from their birth, they would be breaking out into sweats. There would be, loss of their thyroid, for instance, which is very common in women that are giving, birth these days. They would have anxiety, or, just their sleep patterns would be disrupted. So then she started realizing, wait a second, there's so much more happening to our mothers that's not even being diagnosed. Because I think that was, her research showed how few women were actually getting even help or even voicing what was happening to them because of the way society is set up. It was that a woman should just man up and deal with it, and and not really express these emotions that were happening internally to her, even though we're in these nuclear family settings. And oftentimes women giving birth as single parents. That is a big deal in the United States. Even in the BIPOC community, there's lots of single parents, and women just don't have enough support. So her just bringing that awareness and getting birth trauma into the DSM and recognizing that women do get PTSD from birth. And it even explained how, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a number of stories back in the 80s and 90s of women who would be murdering their children. And it's horrible to think of. And of course, society would, ostracize these women and shame them and be like, how horrible. But people didn't actually think, wait a second, how did she get into that psychosis to begin with? This is a form of postpartum depression that's stacked on a woman who's probably had her own childhood trauma and lack of emotional needs being met. And she's got risk factors going into pregnancy that weren't even being considered or analyzed during the intake. And so then when you take a woman who's, for instance, had sexual trauma or sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, or let's just say poverty, has grown up in poverty and has scarcity imprints, and then they get pregnant, and there's a whole hormonal cascade that happens that creates a lot of imbalances because their nervous system is already basically like a junkie. They're addicts to cortisol and stress hormones, and they just don't have enough resilience in their body to take on a human being and carry the weight and the needs of another human being. So then you stack that on their nervous system, and you expect them to be like sane people in society that are not only sane but contributing in beautiful ways. I don't think so. So then you add a woman that not only has, those risk factors, but then they have more than one child and they're taking care of multiple children. Most people who've listened here, if you've gone to an early daycare center and been around the needs in an early daycare center, I'm like, I admire early childcare providers so much because of what they deal with day in and day out on their nervous systems. And in today's world, we have women who are working full-time jobs. They're being wives and they're being mothers. And those are huge jobs on any one person. And then you put it in an environment where they're not doing it with a village. They're doing it on their own. This is why we are in the world that we are today. People's stress is the number one most toxic, detrimental effect that you can have during pregnancy. And they've proven it. They've shown it now with tons of scientific evidence that stress hormones create mental illness and obesity and all sorts of health problems. And you see that with the ACE study that's presented in, for those who, is adverse childhood experiences, that was presented by Kaiser Permanente out of California. But they started to map that, wait a second, people with health issues had trauma in their earliest childhood. And usually, and this is what we're trying to wake the world up to, that this trauma started to just their moms being stressed out while they were growing in the womb. So Kathleen Kendall Tackett did a world of, just lifted the veil. So for to the scientific community and to psychologists that, wait a second, wake up, our most vulnerable population, babies who go on to grow up to be adults, are starting out in this world with mothers who aren't supported and have a lot on their nervous system.
So I think it's time that we as professionals start building communities, because we know it takes a village to raise a child,
Mhm.
needless to say. And we need so many beautiful hearts, beautiful souls taken care of. And we need a complete community shift, a mind shift happening. So
Yeah.
I'm merging the next two thoughts which are coming to me. One, from your practices as a professional, how do you integrate modalities like the craniosacral therapy, the somatic experience, and the mind body spirit awareness, and contribute this to the recovery from birth trauma, and what evidence supports their effectiveness? And of course, after this, I think you dwell with this, and then we can talk of how now going to work together as APA and Heartfulness to carry the spirit forward.
Yes. Well, there's a whole birth or emergence, if you will, of body, mind, spirit therapy, where, and you showed the book at the beginning, the body keeps the score. And so we're catching up with what, mystics and esoteric teachings have known for thousands of years, is that the body is the microcosm of the macrocosm, and everything that happens in the mind manifests in the body and vice versa. So when you treat the whole being, you have to treat the body and the mind. And a lot of the help that's out there for people in the last, few decades has been cognitive therapy, or, even that therapy didn't exist. We grew up in this Victorian age. Everyone in this on this globe has been through some sort of colonization, largely influenced by European monarchies, and that whole infrastructure of patriarchal hierarchy, and how do we learn, and how we want children to be little adults, even though their brains, they don't develop that way. So the neuroscience is showing us how we need nurture first and foremost in order to have these higher skills of to be resilient, or to be in control or regulated of our emotions, and that takes 30 some years. And that takes so much longer than we expect, a 5-year-old to sit in a classroom and behave, when their job is to move and to explore, right? So somatic based therapies, which means body, right, is when we take this approach that the mind and the body are one. So I craniosacral therapy is a great, example. That's what I started in, even though I do a lot with weaving psychology, psychosomatic therapy, and educating parents and understanding the metaphysics, of how we come into form. But craniosacral therapy is a very gentle approach that is used. Anybody should use it. I think you should be getting craniosacral therapy even before you plan on getting pregnant, because it helps empty your nervous system. It helps you, return to this, what do we call it, 0 point field or blueprint on a daily basis. It's just like heartfulness. If you do a meditation, if you teach a person how to reflect on their day and take regular breaks of mind body exercises of just breathing, that we can slow our nervous systems down and be more in rhythm with how we're designed, more in rhythm with nature, for instance. But Craniosacral therapy is one example. I know now we have biofeedback. We have so many different psychosomatic therapies, our energetic modalities that help people enter into these more conscious states of being, right? When they're open and they're curious and they're connected to their heart instead of walking around just with this, big brain up here.
And the
But
heart
all of
is the organ which develops the first in the baby. It's the first sign of life is that your heart is beating.
yes. Yes, and it doesn't even start with the heart, it starts with the blood cells. It's wild. The blood cells have an electrical current field around them. There's an energy field. And that's what quantum this is a really cool time and age to be alive because we have quantum physics that is now entering in and playing with the therapeutic modalities that we have for people to return within to themselves. That's it. Like, I think the best way that we can deal with what we have at hand today is to go within, to go inside of ourselves, to learn who we really are, to know thyself, right? To know what's inside, what matters to us. And the more we do it, the more creative, the more productive we'll be, the more, I mean, it's always a paradox to think go within and you'll learn more about the external world. That's the nature of it though, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm sure beloved Daji would be happy to hear and listen to what you're saying, because that's what he keeps telling people every single day, every single moment. Look within yourselves. And
Yes.
heartfulness practices of meditation, of cleansing, what we do in the evening, throwing out whatever we have taken in during the day, and saying that whatever is not required for my spiritual growth is going away from my system. So these two practices really, really complement each other.
Yes,
And the
they do.
connect which we do through our prayer. This is a wonderful sort of three pillars of practice which we have. And we are giving this to the world for free. We don't charge for the practices.
I know. I think that's amazing, by the way. I love everything about the Heartfulness Institute.
And we are looking forward to the new chapter which we are going to build in and weave in for the parents and the babies to come here for this side of the world, that is the pre and perinatal education and psychology and heartfulness institute coming together for a new chapter beginning. And how do you look at it? Do you feel that the heartfulness practices also could be weaved into these programs and help prevent the birth trauma which exists today?
Oh my gosh, yes. I am so excited about interweaving these two, especially since we're in the process right now of upgrading or updating our signature course, the one that you took, the PPNE course, which people can find through our website, birthpsychology.com. And this new edition that we have released is about bringing the body mind awareness practices. And you don't have to be a therapist, you don't have to be a psychologist or some academia person in order to um, embrace these principles, right? So this is what I love about interweaving heartfulness, is because anybody can do it, everybody should be doing it on a daily basis. I mean, in the United States, we have the Heart Math Institute, and they're showing us all the time about the benefits to our health for creating brain heart coherence. And this is what heartfulness is. It's about brain heart coherence. It's about connecting the mind and the body, the macrocosm and the microcosm. And it's about going within, because we all have the answers within us. We're in a fractal universe, right? So it's all about returning to our heart. And I think as a population right now, a lot of our world problems would be solved if people on this planet turned more towards their heart. because we've been injured, over these thousands of years. There's lots of distrust there and disconnection and fear. But you can create for your own experience the moment you drop into your heart in meditation, or even just through breathing, or even just bringing your mind into your heart and listening to your heartbeat. You settle in your body and you experience a bit of what I call God. You experience the divine. And that's what it's really all about. That's what we're here to do. We're here to experience the divine in our physical bodies with, our senses, to be able to experience this beautiful world that we live in. So I'm looking forward to the class. It's going to make everything more beautiful.
Yes. And I look forward to having you in for many more sessions. I know you're very busy with APA, and APA, for viewers who don't know what they are doing, they are also serving the community in various ways. They have Mondays. I think you can talk about the
Yes.
Mondays, what you'll have, so that
Yes.
people will be more than happy to register for the talks. And there are a whole of topics which are there on the website. We as pre and perinatal educators want to help out parents, want to help out mothers to be and mothers who are, and babies, to help develop a connection with their own selves. So feel free. I think if you can talk a little bit of APA Mondays and APA Wednesdays, so that people would understand how they can connect with APA.
Oh, yes. I appreciate that, Snehal. This is great. Apple Live is a weekly event that we do. And because if you're in India and we do it in the United States and it doesn't jive with your life schedule, they are recorded. And through our membership, which is, a very nominal fee, you can hear these recordings or join in live, but they're from all sorts of people from different walks of life that are talking about birth psychology and how it impacted their life, for healing, for helping their children. So it's a tremendous resource for parents, even, and professionals. Plenty of resources on our website. We have courses that are also designed for parents, that are, um, some of them documentaries to learn about, what happens to a baby in the womb, how a parent could be more connected with their child. Um, there are all sorts of classes that, maybe we even have more conversations on this stream, Snehal, but learning how babies communicate with us, because that's a whole world of discovery. You've done classes, with some of our pioneers in that realm as well, and that's fascinating, just to see how a baby may hold its head, or make gestures with its hands, or how it holds its body tells a story. And it helps simplify a parent's life, because wouldn't we all want to know what's going on in our babies' brains during that time? You're like, what do you need? And they can't, articulate it verbally like us. Um, so there's tremendous amount of resources on our website, and lots of free resources, and even courses that are not that expensive. And I love the course that we're going to be releasing in the new year, 2025, because that will be, an interweaving of practices, that you can do within your body, to attune to your body, to know how to care for it, and in turn, recognize the emotional, spiritual, psychological needs of your children. So we've got a lot to do, Snehal.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Just bracing forward to it. Thank you. I think this particular discussion, a small talk which we have had shared for the last few minutes, would be a source of inspiration for many, and would be a changing point for how babies come into the world, this side of the world. We in Heartfulness are making attempts through our programs, Beautiful Beginnings, which is meant for couples who want to have babies. And there is Divya Janani, which also helps parents, couples who are struggling to have babies. And we have Wow to Wow also, which is a relationship program. All these programs are now going to be offered and in togetherness with APA in their program. So the what Daji says, getting the world together is happening, and even in this field. So thank you so much, Christiana, for coming. And I look forward to you for other programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you.